think about yourselves going to a park in your city, a park which is very green. It has a lot of big, huge trees. There's a huge expanse of grass. The sun is out, but it feels very mellow. The breeze is cool and nice. And as you're strolling through the park, you have a book in your hand. You spot a shaded spot under a tree. You go over there and you decide to sit down with your book. You sit on the grass and you recline on the grass and you start to read through your book. As you're a couple of pages into the book, you start to daydream about what you've just read. How does that make you feel? Does it make you feel happy? Does it make you feel cerebral? Does it make you feel nostalgic? Or do you get anxious about it? Do you perhaps wonder that there may be somebody lurking around the corner? Whatever it is that you're feeling in the moment, I'd like you to stay with it and gently open your eyes. So this is how I started Cubbon Reads, the silent reading community, which is hosted every Saturday in Cubbon Park in Bangalore, which is the city's one of most beloved parks. I started going to Cubbon Park with my bicycle along with a friend, and we both would carry a book simply to go sit and read under a shaded tree, and we would read there for a few hours together. Soon we had a lot of friends joining us as well because they simply liked the idea of sitting beside each other to sit and read. So we thought, why not have more reader friends join us as well? So in January last year, we created the page called Cubbon Reads on Instagram. And then we soon had a lot of people who we did not even know turn up for this activity week on week. And in March of last year, we created some Instagram reels where we just showcased to people what actually happens at Cubbon Reads, which is a bunch of readers, they just come to sit and read without a bother about their personal chores or work. On a Saturday morning, that too. We were lucky for the Instagram algorithm made the video go viral, and within a week, we had from a few hundred followers to over 1,000 followers, and from just 37 of us, we had over 300 people between 2 weekends. Soon, we also had a lot of queries coming in from other cities in India and other cities in abroad also, asking us for starting a silent reading chapter in their own cities too. To them, we posed the question, why don't you start a silent reads chapter in your city? And then we just shared a playbook with them for what worked for us, which is just keep it non-promotional and make it non-commercial in nature, so that when people come there, they don't feel like they are being sold off to a brand. They truly come there for the sake of reading. So we've often wondered, why do people actually like to come to Cubbon Reads? Why do they like to come sit in a public park on a Saturday morning and read there? Because reading by ourselves is not revolutionary as an idea in nature. We all have read at home, in schools, in libraries, and sometimes even in cafes. But I'm reminded of a quote by a friend who once shared with me about how going to a cafe and sitting and reading there can sometimes feel plastic in nature because of how cafes are built essentially, and you're always obliged to pay for the time that you spend there. And sometimes libraries can also feel very disciplinarian in nature because of how formal they are in structure. Compared to those, going to a public park and reading can feel very leisurely, which is what reading for one's own sake is supposed to be. I'd like you to see some pictures from Cubbon Park now about what actually happens there so you can decide for yourselves. So this is a bunch of women all sitting on the grass or lying on their mats, and they're all friends, but they're all reading their own books individually. These are two men, again friends, and they are sitting against each other and reading by themselves. That's a group of people, all individuals, all strangers, but sitting beside each other. 3 of them are reading, and 1 of them is, of course, painting. So what happened with Cubbon Reads is essentially that we had a lot of sub-communities growing from within the community of people who are not just readers, but also have other creative interests like painting, writing, knitting, origami, and so on. And they formed the smaller sub-chapters, all because they essentially like to do these things in a silent space. There is no critiquing what one is reading or painting about. Simply, people are sitting and enjoying this creative activity together. In this picture, you see a mother-daughter duo. The mother is, of course, reading. The daughter is knitting away as part of Cubbon knits. Here you see a bunch of notes, all either handwritten or typewritten by people as part of Cubbon writes. And this is a bunch of people folding origami together, led by a retired physics professor, and again, all just learning from one another in essentially a silent space. Here you see an old gentleman also leaning against a tree comfortably, and he's reading by himself. Here you see a toddler, again, reading with their parents, and both parents are also engaged in their own readings. In this picture, again, you see a bunch of strangers all sitting around a tree, either reading or painting, and there's also an elderly woman who, again, attends Cubbon reads very often. In this picture, you see a bunch of readers. So what happened was, strangely, there was a drizzle, just unpredicted, happening on a Cubbon reads once on a Saturday. But luckily, people had an umbrella because Bangalore, being Bangalore, the weather can usually be unpredictable. But all the readers were undeterred. They simply opened up their umbrellas and they continued to read. Here is a person who has been attending Cubbon reads very often. And he's very kindly always gets a bunch of bananas for anyone to pick and lounge about. And this picture is, of course, the picture that we took towards the end of every session. We stack up the books together, so that's the only time you see what others are reading as well. And then we return the books to the owners. So after the pictures are taken, you only recognize each other by the books that they are holding, and you don't even exchange names until you actually want to do that. So I'm actually took 3 essential questions of why we should have such communities and what can we do about such communities, especially in urban cities. So why there is a need to have a silent community which is so uniting for people across backgrounds and lifestyles, especially in places like Bangalore and Delhi. And why do we need to host them in places like Cubbon Park or Lodi Gardens in Delhi or Sanjay Gandhi National Park in Bombay and so on? So all these public parks, beaches and lakefronts, they're all built on taxpayers' money, and they belong to each of us, to all citizens sitting here and anyone outside. So what can we do to actually make these spaces more accessible to people? How many of us, including young adults, nowadays think about going to one of these public spaces and using them leisurely for our own interests? How many of us actually feel safe enough to do that? Of course, we have our own homes and we have cafes to go to play music or to read, but how many of us actually utilize these public spaces to do so? Do we actually do something about keeping them accessible? Do we do anything about making them more welcoming? Talking about urban cities, we all know how crunched up the spaces are getting with as much construction happening in all these urban cities nowadays. So, of course, the value that a public park has for somebody who's living in an apartment, it's of very high importance. What can we do to actually go out and create a space together for a lot of people from various backgrounds to come and exist? And the next point is about how do we work with stakeholders in media and the government for people to actually come to know about such communities to exist? And also, how do we earn the trust and faith of people who come to these communities? How can we remain absolutely honest in what we are documenting about what happens in these communities? How can we use the power of social media and of word of mouth to have more people join in so that we can make more friends? What happens with urban cities is also that there are a lot of people coming from various lifestyles and backgrounds from other towns and villages. How is it that we can create a space together for these people to come to the same platform and make friends purely because there is a mutual love of interests? So I'd like to leave with a very short note today. Maybe we all could find and adopt a space in our own cities that we see is underutilized or where not many citizens already go to. It could be a neighborhood park. It could be a corner spot in the apartment that you're living in. What can you do to make it more welcoming and accessible to anyone, not just in your immediate neighborhood, for citizens across the city, or even become a pride for the city's people? That's all. Thank you.